Hi, I'm Spencer Krause. I've been building robots for over 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of interesting things, and I've heard a lot of interesting stories. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is a place where my colleagues and I can relax, crack a drink, and talk about some of the crazier things we've seen at work and some of the experiences we've had that have gotten us to where we are today. Subscribe today to join the collaboration. Welcome to the Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Krause. Our guest today is Sean Guerre. Sean is the Managing Director of the Energy, Drone, and Robotics Coalition. Sean, welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here, Spencer. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. Big fan of your work. Love the Energy, Drone, and Robotics Summit. I'm really excited for the Energy, Drone, and Robotics Coalition coming up. And I'm just excited to kind of, talk shop and get to know you a bit more over the course of the podcast.
Same here. I've always really appreciated you guys have been so open over, the various ways we've talked about robotics and all the things that are going on in the industry. I've always found you to be a great resource, and you're awesome also, Spencer, on helping people connect, which is like what we try to do as well.
So, well, same here, right? I could say the same of you. When we signed up for Energy, Drone, and Robotics Summit last year, you were so welcoming, and we were brand new to Texas, really, and hadn't done a whole lot in Houston or the Woodlands, and you just made us feel at home, and not just me, but everyone else that came from SKI Robotics, and it was nice, and it made me want to come back, and I just appreciated that kind of feeling of being welcome.
Well, that's the key thing down here in Houston. We got to make everybody feel welcome.
Awesome. Well, hey, I highly recommend these guys to anyone listening. So, how'd you get into it? When did you start doing the Energy, Drone, and Robotics Summit events? What made you kind of go in that direction? It's a bit of a niche. How'd you go there?
Yeah, so it's now 10 years in the rearview mirror. So, doesn't seem that long. It goes super quick when you're in it. But 10 years ago, we were doing some work around construction for expansions in the energy field. So pipelines, LNG, et cetera. And we were covering a lot of the technology that was going into the plants, actually was being installed. And when we were doing that, we noticed that there was a lot of basically construction site inspections, updates, project updates, which were being done with drones. So it was super interesting. So we started talking to some of the energy companies about that. And they said, yes, we're starting to spin these up for surveying, mapping. Not so much inspection at that time, more project updates. But it was just the nascent beginning, I think, of the inspections. So that's where it started. And they had a lot of questions. What kind of hardware? Do they use their own pilots? Do they go outsource? And so that's where we started, was UAVs, basically was the first robotics, and it was mostly hardware, training, things like that, operations. That kind of evolved over a couple of years to started to go into all types of robotics. So we got into ground as far as the crawlers, the quads, and then even offshore and marine. So we started getting into surface vehicles and subsea. So it really became, as we like to say, from the stars to the seafloor. If it's autonomous and it's in energy, we probably cover it.
Now you're speaking my love language.
Kind of the evolution.
That's awesome. No, it's really cool how that came about. It's funny because I'm buddies with Greg Mann as well, thanks to your group. I really, really like that guy. And he was saying he got started in aerial drones about 10 years ago, which would have been around the same time. So was that just an inflection point for the whole industry? Or was that, I'm sure you had something to do with that in a way.
Well, I think it was just at the time, I'd like to say that it was the easiest use case, right? Was right there. As far as drones, so it really was something simple that they could move over from other verticals that were already using them. Agriculture had already jumped out there. So they basically, I think it was an easy way for people to get involved. And if you think about any work that's done at height, right, that you have to use scaffolding or rope access,
Yuck.
There's a high risk, high cost, high risk. And so anything they were able to suddenly start to flip over to not have to do that risk. And then things like flare stacks, where suddenly you don't have to take down the flare in order to inspect it. You can do it while it's live. That became a big deal. So I think the efficiency, safety case just, man, Spencer, that stuff all rolled up real quick. So I think that's why it moves so fast on that aspect of it.
Who was the first, like, super major that you know of to adopt drones? I mean, like, I'm sure there was one that kind of set the course for everyone else.
Yeah, it's interesting because right off the bat, most of them had at least a small program. I'm trying to think. Shell certainly was early on. Chevron was early on. ExxonMobil on the oil and gas side. On the utility side, it's the ones that you've seen progress to such scale today. Southern, Duke Energy, Ameren, PG&E. Some of these folks started, they were some of the early adopters and have become some of the largest robotics programs.
Well, these guys all have their own drone programs now. Like, they've got pilots on staff. They've got, dozens, if not hundreds of drones. And
right. And they're just flying hundreds of times a day. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of projects, a lot of use cases.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So that brings up an interesting point, which is, like, where do the inspection companies fall into the picture? If, like, all these guys have their own drone programs, why would you call up, like, an Accurant or a Ranger or an Osprey? Like, why not just do it all yourself? Like, I mean, I guess just to kind of get more into the industry for people listening.
Sure. So if you think about it, there's going to be 2 or 3 reasons. So number one is, as their programs got larger, they needed more help. They just didn't have enough. Their internal pilots were too busy. Secondarily, a lot of them, their pilots internally have dual tasks. So think about a utility, they're a lineman and they fly drones. So it's kind of like, it's a great tool to have, in the toolbox or the truck. But at the end of the day, they have other tasks they need to be doing. So you basically have, I think, a capacity issue was number one. Number two, then all of a sudden the hardware started getting, different. So it wasn't all small, quadcopters, right? So you suddenly had things that got fixed wing or going BV loss, right? Beyond visual line of sight. So you started having either special projects like BV loss or special equipment or very expensive equipment involving like LiDAR payloads or something like that. So then you started to need to bring in experts. And that's where I think a lot of the service companies immediately made an impact. They were like, hey, we know how to fly it. We fly an internal pilot at an energy company may not fly LiDAR, very often at all. Whereas a service company says, man, we do that every day. So they know they're going to get good, accurate data and images that they need for their stakeholders internally. So I would say number one is capacity. Number two is project or hardware that makes it unique. And then I think number three is a lot of the energy companies, if you think about it, Spencer, they are an outsourced model. If you look at a petrochemical plant, a lot of the work that's done, maintenance, inspections, a lot of the major work in a turnaround shutdown as they're getting ready for a new product or doing maintenance on the assets, they outsource all that. Thousands of people come in every day to one of those plants who are basically working for inspection companies, maintenance companies. They are not employees of those majors. So you're basically bringing them in that capacity. So it made sense for some of those companies who were already doing the work to start adopting drones and robotics and adding divisions who do that. So
yeah,
you've
that makes
got
a lot of sense.
All that in the mix for why you have most programs are at least a hybrid on occasion, all the way up to fully outsourced.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'd imagine that these inspection companies are flying sort of the most difficult missions for multiple clients every single day. So they probably breed the best pilots if that's all that they're doing is flying missions and they're not also linemen or juggling other responsibilities. And so I imagine for the really tough jobs or, like you said, the really specialist jobs, fixed wing or BV loss, that's when you really want, one of those folks that just does nothing but that all day long.
Yeah. A top pilot definitely can make all the difference in getting really quality data in a shorter amount of time, honestly. So they can, win in a couple ways. And then capacity also, by the way, I would flip to the utilities. You look at, say, someone who's doing wildfire prevention, right? They're doing right away or they're doing vegetation management. at a major utility, let's say on the West Coast, well, they've got to fly a ton in order to get all their reports in order to do preparations or repairs that they might need to do prior to wildfire season. So that's just a lot of flights that have to occur. So they have to bring in hundreds of pilots in order to have that capacity.
And it's seasonal, so it doesn't make sense for them to have that in-house all year round.
Right. You wouldn't have a fleet of pilots. You might or might not have a fleet of drones, but you would not have a fleet of pilots ready, 365 in most cases.
Because you don't need them 365.
Nope. But pilots could be flying every day for somebody.
Yeah, because there's needs in other parts of the world. That makes a lot of sense. Did you know that Collaborative with Spencer Krause now has a merch store? Please go to cwskmerch.com for the latest in CWSK styles. We've got hoodies, t-shirts, hell, we've even got whiskey glasses. Everything in the store has custom art that our team worked really, really hard on, so go ahead and show your support for them, me, and the rest of the CWSK team by going to cwskmerch.com today. Better yet, support yourself and use discount code PODCAST10, all one word, all uppercase, for 10% off your entire order. Thanks for your support and enjoy the rest of the show. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com. So, I mean, what drew you into tech? Like, was this your foray, or were you doing other stuff before this kind of in the area?
Yeah, so my dad actually was ExxonMobil and was
Cool.
an engineer for ExxonMobil. So I come from the oil patch. That's my background.
Awesome.
So energy through and through, and obviously living here in Houston, the Petro Metro, I've had a real affinity for it. And prior to this company, I was with a company that did a lot around power plants and chemical plants. And it was a lot of the technology within a plant. So everything from pumps and valves to boilers, to all kinds of scrubbers, you name it.
Cool.
There's just a ton of tech in a power plant or in a chemical plant. And we had magazines, events, newsletters that were in that area. And so that's really what got me kind of going down the idea of tech versus just generic in the energy industry. And then emerging tech started to become obviously very interesting. And that's where we started 10 years ago with Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition to pull together all that information so everybody could share best practices.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you call it that right away, or did you start somewhere else and then kind of pivot into just drones when they became more prevalent?
Yeah. So think it was EDC, Energy Drone Coalition.
Nice.
So we only knew UAVs at that point. There really wasn't a lot of deployment of other types of robotics yet. I mean, they were just probably coming off the drawing board. So it was really drones. And so we were Energy Drone Coalition right from the beginning. As I mentioned, we added the robotics kind of midway. And then the last couple of years, we've really become a lot about the data.
Nice. So that's the way it's all headed.
Where it's more about the result, making intelligent operations, and how do you do that? So it's interesting that I'd say it's been 3 evolutions within this short 10-year period, from just drones to drones and robotics to now drones, robotics, and data.
That's interesting. I'm surprised it wasn't about data to begin with, to be honest. It almost seems like what was it about if not the data that you're collecting, at least in the inspection space? Maybe the maintenance was as prevalent back then.
Yeah, I think it was about the data, but it was basically not as much. I think one of the majors mentioned in our meeting recently, I was expecting a data lake. I got a data tsunami. I mean, I think that's, obviously with scale, that's the issue, is that, so I think it's always was about the data.
Sounds like something Matt would say.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's one of those things that they didn't anticipate how much data was going to be able to collect, and how many other sensors, which aren't on drones and robots, just sensors that are on the assets or around the equipment, that they're going to be able to get additional data. So I think that's where it started to become a bigger issue of, where do we keep it? Is it on-prem? Is it in the cloud? Who owns it? If we have, like your point, service companies doing work. They're collecting the data. How do we ensure the cybersecurity? How do we ensure the integrity of our IP and make sure we keep it? So there's became a lot more questions about it. And honestly, software and analysis companies started, really evolving. So it went from software to manage my fleet and my flights and my operations to software and now AI that can be used to analyze the data and make it actionable so much faster.
That makes
sense.
I think
those things all work together to make it important.
The amount of times our clients have asked us just to be able to collect a video instead of like an aggregated, data set, which I think is becoming more popular now, as it kind of should. And the tech's been there for a while, but I think it was hard to get people to really believe in it, right? Up until very recently, when it's just kind of undeniable. To your point, like just how far the AI and the aggregation tooling in general has come. It's interesting, right? I mean, like people have been doing a lot with videos on thumb drives, for lack of a better word,
for a long time. Exactly, that was the main way transfer of data occurred. And you probably see it, right? I'm sure with your clients as it has evolved over the last several years. You think about, that basically just wanted a robot to go do X. And now they want that robot to have some level of intelligence. And I mean, think about that. That wasn't even thought of before.
Until they find out what it costs.
Make it work and fit in this turbine or valve or whatever they needed. And it was more right around the hardware aspects and maybe the fuel source, how long will it last? Whereas now it's nobody would think of deploying a new robot without understanding, well, what kind of brain does it have? How is it being taught? What can it learn to become remote or autonomous?
Or I mean, like what data can it return to us that we can then, integrate into our SCADA system or, just general, database of what's going on in our facility. So
right, exactly. Because for them, if you think about it, it's actionable, so it makes it faster. But secondarily, one of the biggest friction points that a large energy critical infrastructure company is going to have is you don't want siloed data. That's been a legacy issue for them for a number of years. Or you don't want parallel workflows.
Which is a result of siloed data.
Exactly. So you don't want it where a plant technician is doing a clipboard and camera, etc. And it's like, and then we're also paying to have a drone or a robot do that. So it's a real issue that you have to deal with every day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you kind of see it, like we've kind of worked on things where the data analysis is like a guy that's been working there for 60 years and the guy knows where all the papers on his desk are and, can just reach in and grab the right one and then interpret the data. And I'm intentionally being vague so people can't ID who this is about.
Understood.
But, you see that and then, you look at, by contrast, some of the platforms that are coming out recently. And I think there was a transitional period, and to some extent there still is, where people are kind of, it doesn't all work perfectly, right? So, I mean, the guy is more prevalent than I think we like to admit the guy still is, that, just aggregates all the data in their brain with that pack rat mentality. But at the same time, I mean, it's just the technology really is enabling, as long as you can kind of make it work with cybersecurity and, all the different stakeholders in the IT department and get through those gates, then, it's been there for a while, where like the algorithms have been there for a while. And so I think it's just, getting everyone to be comfortable adopting it is the big thing.
Once it started moving to the plant level and you started seeing plant managers, maintenance superintendents, people like that, and the operations side and the EH&S side start to get excited about what they could do with robots. That's where I see the real scale. I mean,
for
we're
sure.
up to almost 20,000 folks in the community now. And that would never have happened if it hadn't started to broaden so much, where the uptake is really there, at least in the energy industry. I see people pretty positive.
I think you're absolutely right. It's that social proof. It's the idea that it's like now considered a mature technology, and so it's not high risk. It's kind of funny when you look at these folks that are like just aerial vehicle folks, and all they can see is uses for aerial vehicles. They're terrified by anything else. I went to a regional event here that was for like a particular type of thing. I don't want to out them, so I won't say the thing. But, anything outside that thing, they just didn't care about. They had the blinders on. But, what I've noticed too, and what it sounds like you've noticed, is that when the operations folks started adopting this stuff rather than just the innovation folks, that's when, really, it started becoming just, kind of commonplace, and, people just wanted it. And so, the adoption curve was much easier to overcome, we'll say.
Yeah, I think so. Because in general, you see a lot in the, I'd say, general media, business media, more around AI coming for jobs now. But right before that, it was the robots are coming for our jobs. So there was some certainly negative connotation that was out there. And now I think it's more AI, which obviously we interpret as, well, physical AI as robots.
Sure. Yeah, robots and AI are very good friends, it turns out.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, but I mean, it was kind of an issue out there circulating around, what's going to happen in the future as robots become adopted. But for right now, I think it's good because we've gotten past it's just a new shiny thing, toy. We don't need these at the plant or out in the field. This is a real help.
Yeah.
We see benefits. It's got ROI, business case, safety case. And so I think we're in a better spot than we were just a few years ago.
100% agree, right? I mean, and it's even the way that I've kind of gone about talking to customers about this stuff has changed because, the kind of people that care about ROI are now coming to the table. And so you can have an honest, direct business conversation about, like, look, I mean, how much is not having the robot costing you? Let's start there and kind of back out whether or not it's even worth it for you to invest in this technology. Because if it isn't, let's focus somewhere else, it's probably not a good idea.
It's a really good way to put it. How much does it cost you to not deploy?
Right. 100%. I mean, I think when you bring it up that way, like a lot of operators are a lot more comfortable having those conversations because they know you're not just trying to do a science experiment or, kind of experiment with their facility or their asset. You're just trying to help them run it more efficiently and more safely and more smoothly.
Exactly. That's the goal. It's just a question of what you need to deploy and how to deploy it to make it happen.
100%. You recently spoke to Dr. Matt Alberts lately. How'd you get to know that guy?
Sure. Well, yeah, for the benefit of your listeners, Dr. Matthew Alberts is emerging innovation and technology at Southern Company Utility. And so he gets to look at a whole lot of cool stuff, no doubt about it. But he is actually, main position is making sure that it's usable, or will be usable in the power plants or out in the field for the transmission distribution. And Southern Company obviously is a massive utility with multiple entities, a lot of different kind of plants. So he gets to look at a lot of great technology. But Matt has always been, I think, one of the most curious people I've known. And we originally got to know each other. He was in Austin with Hover Data, who recently was acquired by Technical Toolbox. Anyway, but they had a data company, and they were doing a lot in the power plants and oil and gas as far as making data actionable. They were definitely right at the crux of that. And he spoke at a couple of our events, and we had a chance to connect about that, and always just add a ton of information about where things are going, and it was always great to have him be able to kind of fill me in and fill in our board as to where we were going with, this type of, not future technology, but, right around the corner, right over the horizon kind of stuff.
I mean, he just asks good questions. He's perceptive. He's intelligent. I mean, he's tuned in. He's very on the ball, that guy. So it's just,
he really is.
He's a fascinating guy to talk to.
Got, I'll give him a plug. Great book that's out on Gen AI for manufacturing and really how to evaluate it and deploy it for industrial settings. And I highly recommend that to anyone who is interested in taking a look at AI and getting that deployed at their facility.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I had Notebook LM summarize it for me recently in a podcast. It's a great listen. I enjoyed it.
There you go. AI could help with the AI, no doubt about it. I mean, if there's one thing AI does, it saves us time.
Yeah, for sure. Any trips coming up? Any things to watch? Events? Kind of. If you're a person trying to keep an eye on the energy drone and robotics industry, where are you looking? If you're kind of that industry person that's like just looking for kind of what's new and what's hot.
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is it depends on what you are interested in as far as for your particular deployments, right? Because some people are more around the data, and there's going to be obviously events that you might look towards that are data centric versus others are going to go to something more specific to their vertical. So, for instance, we just had out in San Diego DTEC, Distributech, and that's a very popular event for the utility, particularly T&D crowd. And so there's a lot of technology out there, and drones is a piece of that, as you would imagine, because it's been deployed now for so many years and there's so many use cases. So that's an event that people definitely keep on their radar, and it's typically in February. And then early in the year, you see CES. Obviously, everybody looks at what's happening there. Not so much because so much of it's consumer electronics show,
It is and
but
it
what are
isn't.
the
I feel
trends?
like.
Yeah, but what are the trends, right? And this year, the trend was physical AI. So it just set the tone for the year. All the business press and everybody was physical AI, which equals robotics. Physical AI equals robotics. So that message came across loud and clear to the rest of the industry. So that's a good one for kind of setting the tone, I would say. So there's an example of one vertical. People that are into offshore robotics will look to OTC, Offshore Technology Conference. That comes up in Houston. So that one definitely will be on the radar. And people who are looking more towards just digitalization or transformation might go to CERAWeek, CERA, which Cambridge Energy Research Associates is the long name, kind of like OTC. Sarah's got its own name now, and they have a small, I say small, very large area now called Agora, which is all tech. It's all about tech and energy. And so it's huge dollar tickets to go there. I mean, it's the elite CEOs, and it's always interesting to see what's top of mind there.
That one wasn't on my radar. I feel like I got to check that out now.
Yeah, well, it'll be coming up in March. I think end of March, last week in March.
Where's that at? Is that in Cambridge or?
It's in Houston at the George R. Brown.
Nice. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So those are just some in Q1 that are of interest. Obviously, our focus in Q2 is the Energy Drone Robotics
That's the one that I'm
Summit.
the most excited about.
So we tend to think about that one solely for Q2, but obviously it depends on where you are in the spectrum. If energy's your thing, robotics your thing, it's a great spot.
It's a great event. We really enjoyed it. Last year was the first time doing it. Committed to a booth this year for SKI Robotics. Excited to be back. And I think we're going to keep going. It's a great event. I mean, I met so many people, that we ended up, either collaborating on something or figuring out a way to do business or getting a conversation started. I would say it's honestly, I'm not just saying this because you're here, but like one of the highest return events that we did last year.
That's great to hear, Spencer. That's really, what we want is, we have a commitment to connect is what we call it. So our job is to connect the energy asset owners, the service companies, and the solution providers. And that ecosystem, it's our obligation to connect those folks in every channel we have. And the summit is the ultimate. So that's really important for us, for everybody to be able to come away and say, yes, I made the connections I need to drive forward with my program. If I'm an asset owner, with future asset owners for some people, if you're a solution provider or service company. So it's
a fun event too. I mean, there's great, kind of just drinking culture after the event. There's really good kind of just talks and seminars during the event. Everybody's there, so you're always going to get to know people and talk to folks that are just doing really bleeding edge stuff. I mean, for me, the whole thing was just great end to end.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, we have a little over 300 energy and utility companies send representatives. So it definitely is a who's who when it comes to drones, robots, and data for the energy and utility sector. And some people, liken it to old home week because it's been going on for 10 years. But the great part, like we were talking about earlier, there's new people coming every year. There's new solution providers, new service companies, and new people at the asset owners who are, now using robots and data and AI, and they want to be in the mix.
Yeah. Well, what I really have enjoyed about the community that you've built too, and I said this at the beginning, but it's just so welcoming, and it seems like it's kind of a meritocracy. If you can come in and you've got something of value to provide, people will give you an audience, and so for me at least, that was really encouraging.
Well, I think when you look at the solutions that y'all provide, you guys have one of the, I want to call it a blank canvas because you've filled in many pieces of it, but you have the most flexibility. I mean, you think about it, if they have a challenge, you guys probably could figure out a way to fill that and make something work if they've got the commitment level to do so.
Yeah,
so
we like to think so.
That to be very interesting because most people come with one solution and it's like, we have this, which could be great and often is, but you guys are coming and saying, we've got a variety of solutions and things we haven't even done yet that we could do. That's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people are really opening up to it too, because, when you talk about the things you've been able to, first, I think when you bring that up initially, people are a little scared because they're like, well, who are you to think you can solve all these different problems? Well, here's the way we did it for Siemens Energy. Here's what we did for Caterpillar, here's what we did for these other guys over, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you deliver on these commitments. Yeah, okay, let's get going.
Right, exactly. And you never know how it could get redeployed, right? That's the other interesting thing, because sometimes these technologies, the use case is over here, and then another energy company will come with their challenge, and it's like, oh, well, we were doing that at a nuclear plant, but yeah, we could do that for sampling at your brownfields out in California for your old oil field. Sure. And so it was made for something completely different and now could be redeployed. So I think that's always fascinating.
Well, honestly, like the more I'm getting to know the majors, that's something I really like about the mentality there too, is this. And I mean, not even just the majors, I guess where I live in Pennsylvania, there's kind of a community of smaller fracking companies. And, it's a similar mentality of, like, I think people just want the whole industry to rise, and they don't see it as a threat if somebody else gets access to the same technology they're working on. And I haven't seen that in many industries outside of oil and gas. I mean, maybe to some extent nuclear, but even there, people seem to kind of be a little closer to the chest with, like how much they want, other companies to have access to similar technology.
It is interesting how much they're willing to share best practices. I mean, it's intriguing that you have that collaborative nature, but that's how they were able to crack things like shale. It was only because they were able to share some of that information. I mean, everybody's going to hold a certain amount of their IP or secret sauce, at the end of the day. But I think people are willing to share in theory and, about how we're actually deploying and some of the initial results.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and just the fact that like some of these majors, are willing to sponsor companies that go on to serve, like their competitors and, like the whole industry. I mean, like I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe Valero is a good example of a company that kind of came out of that sort of infrastructure where, I think they got money from like a few of the majors and then they were able to kind of build out a model that ended up serving like pretty much all of them, right? And so
right, for sure, you're seeing it definitely. Would say an example. I won't name names, but tank robotics. You're seeing robots that are being deployed.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Tank cleaning, and there's definitely corporate venture capital and investment as well as resource investment beyond the money to give people facilities, chance to do proof of concepts, et cetera. And you're seeing that in in just one piece of the robotics ecosystem for energy around tank robotics, because almost every energy company has tanks with various fluids in them, and they either want to have them inspected or maintained, and now wanting to do that while they're still in service, so they don't have to empty them, which is a huge help. So they're definitely making investments to try to be key stakeholders in scaling that technology, which would be deployed for multiple beneficiaries, service companies who could use that, as well as the asset owners, who own tanks.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's such a cool industry, and it's just great to see people coming together to solve these tough problems.
that's it. They're solving tough problems, and that's what doers do.
Amen, brother. So I think we're getting toward the end of the time we've got. Is there anything you want to plug on the way out the door?
I just really appreciate the opportunity, Spencer, to be able to talk with you and your listeners today. Certainly anyone who's around energy and robotics, please check us out on edrcoalition.com. We have newsletters, reports, events, membership group, EDR Connect, which I'm very proud to say your company was our very first solution provider sponsor. So you're our first member in that category. So while the community is 10 years old, some of these initiatives are less than a year old. So we're always growing, try to serve people. So check us out there, or feel free to check us out on LinkedIn and, get involved. We're happy to help.
Excellent. I can't say enough good things about the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition. I can't say enough good things about Sean. Sean, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it.
Honored to be on here, Spencer. Thank you so much.
Honored to have you, bud. Thank you for coming on, Sean. Thanks for joining us today. If you've made it this far, chances are you'll like other episodes too. Collaborative with Spencer Krause can be found on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. Subscribe today to get notified when the latest episodes release and support the channel. Have an idea for a guest I should interview? Hop in the comments and let me know who that is. I'm always looking for new people to talk to, and chances are you know folks that I don't yet. Thanks for coming in, and I'll see you on the next one. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com.